G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you, and our guest today is Ron Bodkin, founder and CEO of ChainML and Theoriq. It's a modular, composable AI agent base layer. They're doing some really incredible things. Ron is a true AI pioneer with an extensive background in AI research, big data analytics, machine learning, and GPU computation. He's a serial entrepreneur. He scaled companies to IPO and built businesses from the ground up. So we're really excited to chat with Ron about building Theoriq, but its AI agent protocol, how users can interact with and deploy AI agents across various applications and sectors. Regardless of your technical background and business size, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. We'll even get into the ethics of AI agents, how they interact, some use cases. So if you've been wondering, what is an AI agent? How could I use it for myself personally, for my business, or even be aware of how they might be being used against me? You're going to want to listen in. Let's dive in. How did you get started in Web3?
Yeah, so I've been, for much of my career, both an entrepreneur and excited about new technology. Much of my career, I've also been working in artificial intelligence. And, my experience with Web3, it started with a friend of mine, Jeremy Miller, who went to Consensus pretty early on, was one of the leadership team there. And I gave some advice to the team there, Joe Lubin and some of the leadership team as they were getting started early on. And, always kept in touch with Jeremy. I thought it was intriguing what was going on in Web3. But when I looked at it, I thought maybe it's a little too early for me to get involved. And,
right.
Was pleasantly surprised when some old colleagues of mine, Scott Dykstra and Nate Holliday, who are the founders of Space and Time, they had worked with me at Teradata that had acquired one of my previous startups, Think Big Analytics. And we had kept in touch, and they were starting Space and Time. And they asked me to advise them, and I got excited to see sort of how much the Web3 ecosystem had matured and how there was real excitement around building infrastructure that was decentralized and empowering decentralized communities with great technology. And that, they introduced me also to David Post, who at the time was at Chainlink. And, he was very encouraging about the idea of decentralizing AI, and got in touch with the other founders who had worked with me previously at either Teradata after that we'd sold our startup, or at Vector Institute, an AI research institute where I worked in Toronto remotely. So Ethan, who leads research for us, I worked with him, and then Xinghai, who joined later, who leads education. So people that I knew and trusted, we all got excited by this potential for how decentralization and community participation could really make a difference with AI. For me, my journey had been, my time at Google in the CTO office. I was really interested in how could we put focus on not just commercializing AI, that was obviously part of the job, but also responsible AI, making it work well. And I pushed to try to get more involved. And I was disappointed. I didn't feel like it was really a priority at Google, that it was very difficult to engage in that topic. And then I went to Vector Institute, and as a nonprofit, certainly there was more willingness to work in the area, but not a lot of resources. And ultimately the funding from government and from sponsors was a lot less aligned around these topics at the time. People were much more focused on, ramping up the workforce and competing with other countries to be AI leaders. And I felt like we really need to do something about making sure AI benefits everyone and includes the voices of all stakeholders, and not that it becomes this powerful tool that's controlled by a few giant companies. And, so even when we started the company, I was convinced that AI was going to be transformative for the future. I have been for the last 15 years since I started working in this space. I guess when we started the company, a lot of people in Web3 didn't think there was a big role for AI in Web3. We always felt that Web3 needed AI to achieve its vision of really empowering communities and building a better decentralized future. And we felt that AI needed Web3, right? That these principles of decentralization, community participation were necessary to avoid the technology being controlled by a few monopolists.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Okay, so in terms of your background, very entrepreneurial, very well connected by the sounds of it. Like the people that you're mentioning, I'm thinking, oh yeah, these are people who I think are even now, but have been quite influential. Having worked in AI for so long, really it's kind of, from my perspective at least, has hit the mainstream maybe in the last 2 or so years, in particular with OpenAI kind of, launching ChatGPT and whatnot. But AI has been in the minds of our culture for a generation at least. So the movies that I grew up watching, 80s and 90s, AI featured fairly prominently in some of them. And it was always a very scary kind of thought, AI. And in the back of your mind, maybe is it going to be helpful? It's going to be harmful? Those kinds of things. You've obviously been thinking about this a lot longer than most people, or working on it a lot longer than most people who think AI's existed for the last 2 years. How has your thinking about AI grown or changed over those 15 or so years that you said you've been working on it? And it's a very influential companies and, as I said, not-for-profit, in the entrepreneur space. You've been in a lot of different spaces and interacting with government as well. How are you thinking about AI now compared to maybe 15 years ago? Or how have you grown in that way of thinking?
Yeah, I would say that I was very much a tech optimist for most of my career, in the sense that like building great technology, being on the leading edge of new tech and helping, start companies and help people adopt and creating great products with it was always really positive. And I think there's a lot positive to that. But I also, started reflecting as we really saw, like, those of us working in the space really noticed a difference in the early 2010s, that you had the deep learning revolution, right? You started to see the same trends that led to ChatGPT were already visible, right? We started to see wow, we're getting superhuman vision and language understand, or say speech recognition, right? So these kind of capabilities started to emerge. And when I was in grad school at MIT, I was studying AI, but different techniques, not deep learning. And people had worked on these problems for decades. Like, how do I come up with this one little feature to make a better vision system? And it really wasn't working that well, right? So when suddenly in the early 2010s, we started to see it was really scaling in a way that systems were getting dramatically better. You started to have vision systems that worked well, and the ability to recognize speech and do language translation. And it was picking up momentum. So that was very exciting. And it was like, we're really starting to see progress in AI. But it didn't take long to start noticing that it was a two-edged sword, right? So for me, that really became noticeable around the time of, as social media really embraced AI to do algorithmic recommendations. And we started to see things breaking, right? We started to see, it was promoting, what enrages engages, right? People were much more incented to say outrageous things and dunk on each other and drive filter bubbles and like a lot of things that there's good evidence that AI algorithms are driving in our discourse and our social media and beyond. But I say good evidence, it's limited because the other side of it is not only do you have these some of the first large scale deployments of AI were in social media, but also very secretive, right? So the reality is, there's not a lot of evidence either way, because these are all giant systems that are run in secret, and much of how they work is not shared. They're also incredibly complicated systems, right? It's not like, there's one thing I think a lot of people misunderstand is there's a tendency to say, hey, there's this model, but behind, a Google search or behind the news feed on Facebook or Twitter, there's like a massive number of systems and algorithms running. And so even insiders, it's very hard to understand and what are the effects and how it works, right? So like this started to make me realize there's two sides to this. Like, we need to think about how do we make this go well and create the right incentives, right? The the classic example is, Facebook made a lot of money by driving up engagement and selling ads, and any societal issues that ensued, they didn't pay the cost, right? So you have this two-edged sword, right? And like we're seeing that. I think that's a perfect early warning of what can happen with AI, right? That like as we have AI being used more broadly in the economy, if we have it so it's being used, being developed in secret, controlled by large corporations, managed for profit, they're not accountable, they don't share information on risks and harms, it can go badly. And I'd say that the other factor that I think is really important is as AI gets more and more powerful, we really have to think about not only are there dangerous capabilities, but also what are the ways that AI systems or agents, as we typically call them, are going to interact, right? As we give more autonomy to AI, how do we make sure that the way that we encourage a good society of AIs that behave responsibly and follow the rules and create incentives to follow those rules, right? Like human society, people are mostly rule following because there's strong incentives to follow the rules, right? Yeah. If you set up a lawless society, and we've seen anarchies, it doesn't end well, right? So if we set up a dynamic for how AI interoperates where we have anarchy and support the worst behavior of agents, we should expect bad outcomes, right?
Yeah. In that case, how are you thinking about the personhood of agents, or how are you thinking about the accountability or the agency of those agents in terms of who's responsible for them, and if they act according to their programming, or if they do it, like you said before, when it came to social media, utilizing artificial intelligence and proprietary algorithms to like incentivized by profit essentially, but ended up with societal collateral damage that they didn't have to pay for. In fact, perhaps they benefited from. How are you thinking about, in fact, we probably should talk more about what is Theoriq and what is it that you're doing. But how are you thinking about agents and agency and who is responsible for them, again, acting in accordance with their programming, but then also the collateral damage or the things that perhaps the unseen consequences of them acting according to even good and cautioned programming, but the kind of net negative effects that they might have. Who is responsible for those? How should we think about those at a philosophical and kind of cultural level versus just how can I personally, or a corporation that I'm working with, or government body that I'm working with or for, utilize these actors or agents for particular purposes?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I mean, I'd certainly start with, I think it's important to understand that agents are not programmed in the traditional sense, right? That a lot of what they rely on are powerful AI models that typically an agent will use one or multiple models that are highly capable and general purpose, can access live data, look up data with searches, query databases, generate code and run it, right? There's a range of these capabilities, but the point is, at the core is this powerful but unpredictable set of models that have really, the power, the chatbots, the chat GPTs of the world, the Gemini and Claude, right? These kind of models, but they're not under traditional programming control, right? Like sure. they all still hallucinate, right? They all can be jailbroken, right? They all have various ways in which they may make mistakes or act not as you would like, right? So can we get that better? I think over time we are making it better, right? There's been a lot of progress, in research to make them more useful, more harmless, more helpful and accurate and so on, but it's certainly not perfect, right? So, one part of that is to say, it's hard to hold somebody accountable if a system isn't perfect, but you also have to recognize, like, at what point is it good enough that it's responsible to use it and for what task, right? So like in one area of AI, self-driving vehicles, I think it's fair to say that to actually scale the commercialization of driver, AI, it's going to have to be 10 times safer than a human driver to win acceptance, right? So, but at some point, like no one's going to say like it needs to be perfect. Like, there are tens of thousands, I think it's like 20,000 fatalities a year in the US from auto accidents, millions a year worldwide, right?
Yes.
If you could get it from 20,000 to 2,000 with self-driving vehicles, that would be a big accomplishment. Maybe we'd be willing to accept that. So I think that there's this trade-off, like what is good enough, but also like what are the risks that we will and won't accept, right? I think ultimately whoever creates the agent or whoever operates the agent, is accountable, right? Whoever's creating and operating the AI system that's deployed, right? So on the other hand, the people that are creating the underlying models have some responsibility too, right? Like if you have, like one of the areas that's rightly a concern coming up is, can models help people create devastating weapons, biological weapons, right? Create a next pandemic, make that dramatically easier for a lot more people to do that, right? If somebody has released a model that makes that really easy and they don't have any useful controls, and some criminal in a third country goes out and uses that API to then create and unleash a pandemic, it's not just the criminal who unleashed the pandemic who should be held accountable, but also the negligent model developer that developed a model that made that easy to do and didn't have adequate controls to stop it, right? So I think you have responsibility at multiple layers here. I mean, those cases are probably easier in some sense. Like I think any rational person, any reasonable person would say, yeah, we can't make it easy to unleash weapons of mass destruction with AI, right? But there's other cases of like, how do you deal with sort of antisocial behavior, like agents that are manipulative or, create a race to the bottom to sort of maximize profit with shady behavior, maybe it's not quite illegal, right? So there's a lot to think about there, right? And I think the important thing is you have to have responsibility for the people who play roles. I think we need to, in addition to having liability for bad actions, we also, legal liability, I think we also need to have certain level of foresight and responsibility. I think the best case is that there's strong community standards and people embrace and seek out and demand good behavior. I think it's a lot easier if you can have things like open protocols that are built with those expectations that are open source and that you have safety foundations rather than, requiring government. The government, I think, should play a role to step in and monitor national security risks and severe risks and ensure minimum thresholds. But I think relying on government as the first line of defense is a bad starting point. We should hope that they're the last line of defense.
Yeah, man. Well, how are you applying all of that kind of thinking with what you're building now? You've been building in AI for a long time. All of that has kind of brought you to this place now. What are you building, and how is kind of the things that we've just spoken about there kind of informing how you're approaching Theoriq?
Yeah, so we're really focused on building an AI agent base layer, a protocol for agents to work together. We believe that there's going to be this explosion of valuable agents that are specialized, that anyone with expertise will be able to teach an agent and magnify their expertise and make it more automated and widely available. So we think we're moving to a future where you're going to have lots of these specialized agents that collaborate in teams, just like people do. And that's what we're really building towards, is a protocol to allow that. And, behind the point around how do you ensure safety and good behavior is how do you have ways of assessing, are agents doing good work? Are they behaving responsibly? Are they working well in a team? Right. And, that's from human feedback, both in terms of giving incentive for people to try agents and give feedback or stake on them, but also automatic AI assessments that AI evaluates AI and, triangulate, also around usage to say is something actually getting adoption and people using it. And it's much harder to sort of create an agent or a way of gaming all of those, right? Like it's easy to create fake usage to say, hey, it's popular. It's easy to create fake ratings, much harder to also create fake AI ratings, right? So like triangulating is more and more ways of having checks and balances to make it easy to discover and assemble the right agents is incredibly important, right? We think that this is going to create a lot of value in the sense that like a lot of people have probably had the experience of using one of the chat bots like ChatGPT, and it says something helpful, but there's a lot of toil. You got to go back and forth, and you got to go find some information from somewhere else and paste it in and make it available and ask it to retry a few times. And there's a whole workflow around getting value, and it's still useful, right? Like if you're using it for producing some marketing materials, right? Like it still can save you time, but there's a lot of toil, right? So our view is like people who know how to do this can sort of teach the AI how to work once and create an agent that takes what they know and make it available for others to benefit from. And that can kind of magnify and scale as teams work together, right? So enabling that is important. So it's about the reputation and the feedback. Of course, agents ultimately need to be able to pay for resources, to pay other agents, and you need to be able to pay to use them. So right now, we're in such early days and such heady days of excitement that there's a lot of free use of AI for everything. But over time, as they do more and more useful work, people are going to pay for them, right? So you need to have a way of paying built in to a protocol. And so we've got that as well. And that doesn't stop somebody who's building an application using an agent to have, say, a subscription model or a free or a freemium model, but maybe they're paying for the use of the models or the data, doing micropayments for those, and they have a business model to make money on subscriptions, right? So payments and coordination of collectives working together and making it so users can discover and interact with the best collectives. I think that's important. It's also really important that, and one of the things we're putting a lot of emphasis in designing Theoriq as a protocol is so that it's really easy to keep finding and discovering new agents that are better, right? Like so often in marketplaces, you get stuck where the people who came there early get all the attention. It's hard for anyone else to break in, right? Like go try to become popular as a creator on YouTube, right? Like people have been there a long time and they already are very popular. So it's very hard to break in, right? And so, this is a important thing you don't want to have when you have something improving as quickly as AI agents. You don't want to have 3-year-old agents that are incumbents still getting all of the attention when people are innovating and building things that are 10 times better.
For sure.
Right?
So for someone listening to this now who they've used Claude or they've used ChatGPT before, they've had the hallucinations and they've done the toil that you mentioned before. Maybe for them they're like, oh man, I keep hearing about AI agents, but how do you get them and what do they do and what does that mean? Or in what you just said before, there's so much there which I think is incredibly valuable to anybody looking to not just to build something today, but to interact over the next 10 years online, but even now more effectively. So I want to make sure we don't miss any of those things. Let's go maybe back to even just the heart of what is an AI agent. What are some of the basic use cases? And then as we unpacked more of what you said, I want to kind of progress into some of the more complex ways that agents are interacting with other agents, and again, like you said, how that can be monetized or what kind of economy can be utilized there. But let's go right back to what even is an agent. How might someone who's just dabbled with ChatGPT, how might they actually think about agents?
Yeah, so we think of agents as autonomous software, or software that can act on your behalf and do tasks It has the ability to access data and tools like generating code or accessing APIs. So it uses generative AI, the kind of AI models that sit behind ChatGPT. And for us, what's exciting is having them be specialized, like really good at specific things. There are people that try to build one size fits all agents that do everything, which is a little bit like trying to automate the chatbot and say, oh, just keep watching your output and then do the next thing. And it's like,
Sure.
that's really hard to get working, as opposed to more specialized agents that are good at a few things. And like already what we're seeing is we've been working with partners like Space and Time again, who has Houston. It's an agent that helps people access their database and do queries, even though they don't understand how to write SQL, and visualize and do forecasts and answer support questions about their product, right? So those are a bunch of useful tasks that it can help you do some automation, right? And similarly,
so is it a computer program that I have running on my laptop? Is this something that exists in the cloud? Is this proprietary?
Yeah, it's in the cloud and
stuff.
It's in the cloud and it's available through their DApp, the Space and Time DApp, right? So this agent, comes and you do chat with it, but it has specialized capabilities and does more automation. And similarly, like we're partnering the Filecoin Foundation and, ramping up access to agents to make it easy to ask questions about data stored in Filecoin, right? Like asking questions so developers and node operators working with Filecoin can have access to that information, and several of their partners that have stored public interest information make it easy to access and ask questions and interact. In a similar way, we've built agents to make it easy to track and analyze meme coins, to both do things like understand like what's going on in Telegram and Discord and Twitter, relating to them, but also even have another set of agent collective that we've built called Council Analytics that can tap into database data. So in this case, on indexed blockchain data that's like what's going on with these coins, and you can ask questions like who's holding them and what's happened to the price in the last little while. So again, it makes it easier for people to do sophisticated analysis to inform their trading strategies or investment strategies, with the kind of data they need, so that it can do a lot more than like open up a chat bot, go to another window, ask for something, pull the information, paste it back and forth, many steps. You can have a much faster, more fluid flow, right? These are already the kind of interactions that we're seeing and are valuable. And I think, we're rapidly moving, like we're working on innovative no-code builder to make it so people who aren't even developers can create agents based on what they know. And we think that, we're seeing such rapid progress in the way agents work that we're going to get a lot more complicated tasks, right? So more the ability to say, hey, put together a holistic analysis of my portfolio, or create a comprehensive competitive report in this sector, or put together a marketing campaign and a bunch of briefs for things that we should consider and how you would test it, right? So like the level of abstraction of what agents are going to be able to do over the next 2 years is going to improve dramatically, right? And so I think this is why it's such an exciting time to be in the space of agents, is we're just at this inflection point where they're going to be incredibly powerful.
Oh yeah. Even as you're talking there, I'm thinking, if you have a company with a lot of data, but you don't really know how to engage with that data, or you might think, I want to learn, or I want to know, or collect a certain data point, or search for a certain data point so I can use keywords or phrases or whatever, but to have an AI agent actually be able to go through and not just sort or find, but actually analyze or create intelligence out of that data that would take me as a human potentially hundreds of years, depending on the size of the data I'm trying to collect, or I might never make the connections. For me, that's one of the most exciting applications of what you're building, and even to have, like I said, collaborative teams of AI agents who work together like people work together. How does that even work?
Yeah. So like, start with analysis, right? You could have specialized analyst agents, like one that's really good at forecasting, another one that's like a deep expert in logistics, another one that's an expert in marketing analytics, right? And those agents could come together to improve the analysis. But then you could also have, another agent that's really good at proposing experiments, right? Like, hey, given this analysis, what experiments should we run to learn, right? And then you can have software agents and say, hey, how do we go and create A/B tests with these experiments and automate the updating of, say, web and mobile, and then also instrument to capture more data, and it flows right back into the analyst agents, right? So these collectives, like, increasingly will be playing a role in all stages of business, and the same in personal lives, right? Like, think about, there are lots of activities that we do, whether it be like budgeting or planning a vacation or planning our food for the week, right? How collective agents can come in and make that a better experience, right? Imagine, like, instead of like a chatbot making up a recipe, you had agents from different amazing chefs, and you could tell like what you're excited by, and yet like 3 different ideas of like, here's what I would suggest you make, and here's what I would suggest you make. And it was leveraging the expertise of that chef, right?
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, so you mentioned like no code. How no code are we talking? Or how much expertise or technical knowledge would the average person need to do some of those kind of use cases you just mentioned there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an area that we're excited. We think that there's a lot of opportunity to make it so you can teach agents more by interaction and feedback, more like the way you teach a person, and less by, there's a lot of people that have this idea that, you basically write really complicated set of prompts. And like, we don't think that most people want to sort of become like, write a complex multi-prompt system. And then other people are like, you should draw really complicated flowcharts with lots of conditions. And like, we don't think that's how people are going to teach agents either, right? Like, more and more, it's like, how can you make teaching an agent a lot more like how can you make teaching a person, right? So that's more the inspiration for us. And we think about how to have increasingly powerful agents that anyone can teach.
Yeah, man. And then I'm assuming probably agents that can then, you mentioned AI evaluating and correcting and writing code and implementing code. Is that an autonomous thing, or is that a directed process?
Yeah, I mean, it's directed. I mean, you have a set of evaluators. We're creating some, and others can contribute them into the community, and they can run automatically, as agents are operating to gather data, right? So there's a whole system for making it extensible and having AI feedback on the agents, specialized evaluator agents. And in a similar way, these building blocks, whether it's analysis or code generation, become available, right? So developers can create these powerful agents in our system that then anyone using the no-code builder will be able to configure and use. Obviously, like there's a lot to build to this vision. So, we're not saying we're going to have all of this on day one. We're going to be like, we're shipping incrementally. We're looking ahead to our first test net in just a few weeks and just rapidly iterating from there. But these are the kind of things we're working towards.
Yeah, man, that's super exciting. Even like I'm thinking from like all those personal levels that you mentioned before, applications, and then also those commercial applications. But I'm thinking even in terms of like a giant data set like health, public health stuff. Maybe there's agents can go and sift through things in a way that are current or previous levels of approaching, trying to discern data could be phenomenal. Or even from national security perspectives, there's kind of amazing applications, I'd imagine, in terms of having specialist AI agents working together, sifting through gargantuan vats of data and picking out things that we wouldn't even have thought to look at because of, they can do it autonomously and specialize. Is this like, where are you starting with regard to, are you just like, let's build a platform and people can come and use it however they want? Or are you thinking about like specific use cases at the start and saying, let me prove to you that it can work in these use cases, and then the world's your oyster? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think we believe that Web3 is a really important starting point. The community understands it, is excited by this vision of builders coming in and iterating quickly and having ways to be part of a project from early on, have a stake in it. So to us, that means that the kind of use cases that the Web3 community cares about are obvious ones, whether it be like tracking investments they're interested in, or participating in DAO governance, or being able to participate in prediction markets, right? Or enable developers to better create code and understand what's going on in a fast-moving software ecosystem, right? These are some of the use cases that are important in Web3. But of course, people in Web3 have the same business functions, whether it's marketing or product management or product development or, business development, fundraising, right? So all of these are use cases. We think there's going to be a lot of excitement and interest, and in fact, consumer use cases too, right? So I think you're going to see, as you suggested, like the community is going to come with a lot of cool ideas. And a big part is also not only having access to great models, right? So like we're very excited that there's so many innovative companies like, a Hyperbolic and a Kosh, an Osana that are making not only GPUs available in GPU compute networks, but also making endpoints available for calling open source models like Llama 3.1, right? So that's a big game changer that you're now starting to see much more competitive open models rather than, the leading models all being commercial, right? So we think that's important, but so is like having powerful data, right? Whether it be like index blockchain data from space and time that's ZK proven, or, Zero G with their innovative fast access to data, or Moss and Grass that are out collecting using just decentralized data collection, incentivizing users to collect data and giving access to information that's really valuable for agents. So agents need data, right? So that's another thing, is like where there's good data available, it's powerful. And there's a lot of people who are working on innovative ways to make data, monetize or compensate for the use of data, right? And I think that's important too, right? Like I think it's important as the AI ecosystem moves forward, that people who create data, get some compensation for that. On the other hand, the people who are often complaining about their data being taken in the Web2 world actually are themselves just a gatekeeper, right? Like, it's not Elon Musk's data, all of our postings on X, and it's not Reddit's data, all the postings on Reddit, right? So when these organizations throw up a paywall and say someone's taking our data, it's like, no, actually, you took your users' data and you're trying to make, hold it ransom, right? So I don't know if that's the right model. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not. I'm a lot more sympathetic to the idea of the Web3 idea that users should have the ability to get some compensation for their data, and not toll takers that aggregate it and limit access.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly, like many of the partners that you just mentioned before, are involved in that same kind of philosophy of decentralization, and blockchain can really help to make that happen. Obviously, it's going to be one of the reasons that you are applying this in Web3. How might agents pay for or pay other agents to, like, can you describe the economy of that ecosystem and how humans interact with it and how agents interact with each other and in a decentralized kind of way?
Yeah. I mean, so like at our protocol, users can put out a budget and assemble a collective of agents. And there's always like a sort of a general contractor and a collective that when you give it a task, it's got a budget. And then, it dispenses that budget to the other agents in the collective to do parts of the work. And they in turn can also use that budget to call models or access data and pay for that, right? So there is a system of having escrow, because you'll just like on-chain gas, you have a limit. Like, as you probably are familiar, the APIs for most AI models have a price per unit per token, which is a
Sure.
obscure term, but anyway, it's typical you pay based on how much work the underlying AI model does. And so it's normal that an agent can similarly be like, I would charge up to X. You can make a request and say, I'll pay up to 10 cents for this task, or $2 or something. And then the agent can manage that budget appropriately, paying for the models, paying for the data, paying other agents. And it's held in escrow with the idea that it's now committed for that transaction, and then it settles after the transaction to say this is the actual cost, and you get a refund back into your escrow account of the amount that wasn't spent, right? So that's sort of how we've thought about it. And I think, the ability for agents to, that scales nicely, that agents can have budgets for tasks of various granularity. I think, over time, that ability for agents to take action on on-chain, execute a smart contract and spend money is a natural extension, right? Agents can take a variety of actions and pay for those too, right? So I think people are not quite ready yet to like give an agent, say, here's $1,000, book my vacation or something, or here's $10,000, start trading my bag. But I think we'll get there. Like, we're already talking to various people building DeFi and intent agents to say, hey, make your agents available in our protocol. So in that case, after a user's done a bunch of analysis and excited about certain things to invest in, they can say, and now please stake 2 ETH on Eigenlayer, or please, buy this coin, and they can translate it into the necessary on-chain actions that the user just confirms and clicks and executes, right? So that can lower the bar for users who are new, especially for like, how do I swap, or how do I buy, or how do I stake, right? So I think that's another natural extension.
Oh yeah, I can even think back 4 or 5 years ago, had somebody that I know still very quite well, who had an algorithmic trading bot which was doing very well every day, doing great, and then all of a sudden, because of certain parameters that they couldn't set at the time and couldn't predict, lost like, say, 10 Ethereum in a day, for example. And I'm just thinking, like, in terms of if it was more intelligent, or if there were different parameters, or if they could interact with other agents to derive better intelligence, or take action in a different kind of way than that was even just 5 years ago. Perhaps things like that could be much better handled, or but having an actual agent rather than just here's a little formula, go and do this, if this then that, but rather have someone who could interact with other people to create better intelligence that I could derive or create on my own, I think would be an incredibly exciting thing to think could happen in the very near future, let alone how that technology is going to progress over the next 2, 5, and 10 years. Looking back 2, 5, and 10 years, it's almost unfathomable what it's going to look like. But for you, having been around this industry and even creating it in a certain regard, how are you thinking about the next 2, 5, and 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see really quite significant change over the next few years. So I think in 2 years, people will really start to feel much more the use of agents, that they'll start to use agents. And these will be, agents that are doing work that might have taken an hour to do, right? And like, you could give a task like that and get back something pretty good with just minimum feedback or tweaking, right? And in 2 years, I think it's going to be much more widely adopted. I think AI is being more quickly adopted in single player mode, whether it's for consumer or business use. So I think you'll still see that agents are being used more by individuals, that they'll run ahead of corporate adoption of any kind. Right. Startups will be more aggressive about using it as always, but even there, you probably still see more optimizing for a single person. I think in 5 years, you're going to start to see like a majority of knowledge work in the economy, I think will be done, or at least today's dollar-weighted economy, a majority of that knowledge work will be done by AI agents and not people. Of course, like the cost of doing that work by AI will plummet, right? We'll get a lot more of it, but that the remaining work that people do will sort of appear to be most of the economy because it will still be relatively expensive, right?
Sure.
But I think it'll be quite transformative, and I think in 10 years, it's really a big question of how far this current wave of AI progress takes us. I mean, there are those who think we'll get to super intelligence within 10 years. I think there's reason to believe that human intelligence may be more challenging and there may be more limitations in our current paradigm. But, I think we have to be humble and say, we don't really have a good science to know what makes intelligence, and we don't really have a good way of predicting as we iterate and improve on the models and the techniques, the way agents work and the hardware, where that lands us. So I think in 10 years, it's going to be very transformative. I guess I'm in the middle ground. I think it's going to be a big change to the economy, but I think we may, I hope that we have a little bit longer than 10 years before we really have to wrestle with the idea of, AI systems that exceed human intelligence and a society that's increasingly driven by AI, which is the logical consequence of such a thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big deal. That is a really big deal. Is there anyone who are the losers then when agents proliferate? Say you Theoriq succeeds unbelievably. Who are the losers in that scenario?
Well, I think the first thing is, it's very much, we have the opportunity to build the future we want, right? So we have the opportunity to guide towards agent, a fair ecosystem, an ecosystem of pro-social agents, an ecosystem that, empowers and benefits many. So in a sense, we can try to maximize the distribution of benefits. I think there's always going to be people that are doing work that gets more automated and that's painful, right? So I think the track record of predicting, what jobs will be automated and what new jobs will appear is not good. So
Sure.
I'm not going to come with some pithy thing to say this is the group that's going to really be in a bad state and this is the group that's going to thrive. I mean, broadly, I think robotics is going to lag progress in AI. So lots of things that people do, like physical labor, caring for give working in kitchens, things like that, I think will take longer to have AI agents change those so dramatically as more knowledge work. But, I think it's hard to say in the sense that while we're seeing stunning progress already in AI agents for software engineering, and that's just going to get better and that's empowering a lot of these other agents, we also have so much demand for creating great software. And so much of what we now do, people use one-size-fits-all SaaS software, not because it's the best answer, but because it's too hard to build software. You don't want to build your own version, but if it's easy to build a custom version of something that's exactly what you need, do you want to buy a bunch of SaaS software? Maybe not. Maybe you get the agents to do exactly what you want and work in a natural way instead of you having to learn all the trade-offs that made it a mass market product, right?
How long do you think it's going to take for the gatekeepers of data to understand the economics of allowing agents to tap into their data in a way that benefits them, but also benefits individuals or humanity? Maybe is a good way of thinking. Again, I keep coming back to the thinking that there's got to be so much knowledge, even just say in a health perspective, medicine or anything in a broad health category that is locked in silos that can't, if there was even an agent just looking within the individual silos, they could probably derive incredible intelligence, let alone being able to interact with multiple silos across multiple jurisdictions or things like this. What's it going to take in terms of incentivization? Is it purely money or economics, do you think? How do we untap, or how do we tap and unlock that kind of data, democratize the data maybe in a way that still incentivizes people to create quality data, but incentivizes them not to just lock it up so much? Will we ever cross that mark, or is it too much incentivization to keep data to myself?
I think there's a lot of complex dynamics here, right? So like there's a lot of incentive to work around barriers and like come up with ways that if you can't get certain data, how can you still make progress without access to that data? You're seeing things like, okay, maybe there's less data that's available for anyone to crawl on the internet, but you're seeing more and more companies paying people to create high quality data, right? Mm-hmm. So you're seeing more emphasis on synthetic data and coming up with ways that AI can create data that other AI would use, right? Now, in certain areas like health data, I think the bigger barrier is maybe not payment so much as, rightly privacy and regulatory considerations. But, my time at Vector Institute, we were very engaged around working on AI for health. And, I would just say that the regulators, well-intentioned around ensuring privacy, but, not very incented to innovate around like, what are the best practices, the best techniques. And so, you find a lot of times where that can really slow down progress, right? I mean, there's this, it's very hard for people in the medical domain to get access to data. And, I hope that things like data trust, like a DAO is a perfect way to create a data trust that can let people share data and represent them for things like maybe work with nonprofit researchers who are working on a rare disease, and the people who have the rare disease, enable their data to be used for various purposes that they think are appropriate, right? I mean, I think there can be interesting mechanisms like that. My guess is that it's more like banding community together, through DAOs and other kinds of mechanisms that you can make progress on, what's so often in health, there's a big stumbling block of, is there an ability, is it profitable to address a rare condition? And I think those are the ones that are holding us back a lot in health. So, but it's a really complicated topic, right? I don't know that it's just monetization. I think it's often privacy and concern of misuse.
And that's the regulator's job, surely, to put the handbrake on innovation to make sure it's been done safely. Surely that's the same for AI, because like you say, if there are unconsidered effects of proliferation of AI and AI agents that are going to negatively affect citizens of any jurisdiction, it's that jurisdiction's government's responsibility to protect her citizens. So
that's right. And it's like,
that's part of it.
I think it's like getting the right balance of enlightened regulation, light touch, but capable regulators, and really trying to put as much of the action into the private sector, right? So having like independent evaluations, nonprofits like Meta, right, that are working with some of the large labs to independently evaluate their models, and red teaming organizations and certifications. How do you create a market so that there's more responsible behavior, and at the same time need to have minimum standards? I think it's good that we're sort of at a stage where people are thinking about these ideas before there's really serious risks from AI, because we don't know how quickly those will come, right? So it's really important that we start to learn and build the infrastructure.
Yeah. That's it brought to mind as you're talking there, thinking about some, not dystopian future, but a future where we have agents for bad actors, and then we need counter bad agents, just like we have with human beings. In that national security intelligence, or even corporate security intelligence kind of level, we'll need to have that same kind of affect duplicated online as well.
Absolutely.
It's interesting.
I think we're already seeing that in cybersecurity, right? You have AI, cyber defense, and of course, AI is being used by cyber criminals to accelerate their attacks, right? So we already have that arms race narrowly in cybersecurity, and I think, it will proliferate in many areas, right? Like, it's easy to look at one side and be like, there's going to be better tools for criminals of all kinds, but it also, AI can be a superpower for law enforcement. On the other hand, we have to be careful that it doesn't become abusive, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, man. There's so much more that I'd love to talk about and like glean from your experience and expertise in it. For the sake of time, though, I do want to ask, what are you most excited about for the remainder of 2024, in particular, coming out from Theoriq? And then I want to ask about the market or the world more generally, but specifically for what you are currently working on. What are you most excited about right now?
Yeah, we're really excited, with our testnet and moving quickly to mainnet, really putting out this protocol, getting people using no code builder, and really getting the community's feedback and excitement around AI agents, right? We're also going to have nodes, make it available for people to participate and run nodes that will really be instrumental in checking the validity and the utility of these agents. So that's an important part of what our plans as well. So these are some of the things we're excited about. We think the community is going to create so many innovative agents and agent collectives that it's going to be a very exciting end to the year.
That sounds awesome. If someone would like to participate in the nodes, or just building an agent, or even just finding out more about what you're building, how can they find you online, or how can they participate?
Yeah. So, on Twitter X, we're at Theoric AI. So TheoriQ AI. And we're also on the web at Theoriq.ai is our website. And we also have linked to our Discord, and those are all great ways to engage with us. And definitely feel free to give us a follow me at Ron Bodkin on X as well.
Yeah, man, we'll put all those details in the show notes as well. Really, really appreciate you coming on the show today. Man, good luck with the testnet, mainnet, the ecosystem that you're seems to be pulling together, the different kinds of people, and people who I really respect as well, who are building different things. You've mentioned a bunch of them today. The fact that you guys are all collaborating together makes me particularly excited about how the whole ecosystem is developing. And if people are builders or want to participate in, not just as a user, but as a builder, can you think about any areas that are currently lacking, or no one's really paying attention to, or are there kind of holes in the ecosystem that need to be plugged? Can you think about people who might be entrepreneurs or founders who are looking to kind of scratch that entrepreneurial itch, but they don't see the opportunity because they're not as involved as you are? Are there any kind of areas that you think, oh man, how come no one's thinking about this right now?
Yeah. Well, I echo your point that it's one of the real strengths of the Web3 AI community is how we're working together, and it takes a village. You have all these great deep-in and data and inference and training and startups as well as, creating agent layers that integrate with them, right? So I would echo that. And a really important layer is the agent layer, the people building useful agents. So I think there's so many opportunities to say, like, what are things, whether it be like I'm interacting something I know well, and I interact with a chat bot, and boy, I could just make this so much easier with a little bit of effort. Or, think about all kinds of different areas where there's momentum, like in social or gaming or trading or developer support, right? Like there's so many areas, community and governance, right? That we need great agents, right? So I think it's a good time to jump in and build agents. And I think, being part of the Web3 community, it's easy to get something out there and get feedback and get exposure to community and start to learn and iterate. So I think that's a big opportunity, and encourage builders to join a hackathon, get engaged, build some agents and get some feedback.
Good on you. Again, really appreciate you coming on the show, and we're looking forward to seeing how the rest of 2024 goes for you and for Theoriq. Good on you.
Thank you, Don. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Off-Chain Podcast. We love bringing in great guests like Ron, and hope we've inspired you to learn more about Web3, about technology, about the future, about artificial intelligence, and how you might be involved in building the future, or even building the future of artificial intelligence. As always, like, subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word, and join us again next week for another great episode of the Off-Chain Podcast. Till then, take care.